Hello, welcome back to your project. This project is different from what we did in 2021 substantially. So I've been endeavoring to put together a set of construction drawings that's much more limited and just shows what you wanted to get done. And so your work is really starting from here and going that way. And hopefully this will create less objections down there at the county when we try to get the permit. But this is part of the new one that we had planned, and this is what you have here. And the last time we were taking down this wall and expanding all the way into that space, so we had this crawl space going the whole way up here. So that was the first thing that needed to go away, because that's not going to be needed down there. And then the second thing, you said you're just going to cover these walls with framing. You'll definitely be able to get enough insulation in here to meet their code. And I don't know, they will probably want us to meet that energy code from our remodeled space forward, which makes it a challenge at these solid masonry walls on the front and back, on north and south. However, even if they weren't going to give us a hard time about that and required, this is probably the best time to get some decent insulation in those walls. You had mentioned spray foam, which you can get the requirement in a 3.5 inch wall. So technically only one of these would be required, but you need them anyway. More on that later, but for now we've framed walls on the inside and outside here. And as I said, it's probably a good time to just and the purpose of this film is because now that this project has substantially changed, very substantially changed, there are a number of decisions that really it's up to you to make with regard to everything that's happening in here, but without even thinking about how you're going to be designing your new kitchen in here, or whether that's going to stay as it is. All of that has to be considered. I don't want to just throw some bricks and a window or two at this project, because presumably you're going to stay here and try to keep this, make this something worthwhile going forward as you continue to develop whatever you're going to develop. But there are just a number, quite a few decisions that need to be made and can only really be made by you. So you might want to keep notes as we go through these, because I don't remember half of the reason I kept some of these slides. But I think we start though, we get rid of this crawl space. We have this crawl space down here, so we get rid of that. All of this all stays the same. There's not a lot I have to do to change the construction drawings once you decide what we want to do about with regard to all these different decisions. That's dogs, my mom's dogs in the background, all that various rigmarole. And I'm changing this and adding the concrete walls to that in the event that that becomes relevant. So we limit our crawl space to this space here, and this is our stair framing kind of remains the same. We're still going to be going down 4 out level here and down 4 to the garage, which is at -30 when it crosses here. And this was what we had with that whole thing expanded in here, and everything changed, and etc. So we want to revisit this now with these new ideas in mind. One thing, if you remember back here, that landing kind of went over to the wall, and I don't know if you want to extend that landing over to this wall, have an opportunity to put that door anywhere along there, or use that landing space out there. That's one thing. Just offhand, that's one thing. Okay, so this wall here, which is just block anyway, that's coming down, and that's not load bearing. The next thing though is we have at least to my recollection, or whatever I did at that point, it looked like these walls were furred inside, so they're just not insulated at all, it looks like to me. And I have just taken that one down, and this will entail adding jambs to the inside of that window and taking that door out and resetting it and adding jambs to the outside of that, exterior jambs. And that will apply for those ones down at the bottom as well on the south wall if we decide to fur that wall. Those units will have to be taken out and reset. The door unit and the window units have to be jammed out, which will give you wider window sills for what that's worth. But I think now is the time to upgrade that insulation. And I just did that. See, my feeling was that they were going to require it on the new walls where we were converting this current garage. They were going to require the R19 at the top and the bottom and the left. And so once that much happened, and I can't quite remember how your kitchen is set up, but I presume that you're going to just take that apart and start over and do something else in here. And so for the moment, I extend that 4-inch wall all the way across. Now, but it's important to know here though, I don't know how expensive that closed cell spray foam is compared to fiberglass. But because you're doing this to all these walls, but these walls, right now I'm showing them with a 1/2-inch gap between the inside, the old inside, and you will strip off that furring and so forth. But I'm showing with a 1/2-inch gap because they usually want you not to have that wood in contact with any brick that way. But you could just put 1-inch foam against the inside of these walls and then put your framing in, so you lose another 1/2 inch, an inch out of this space here. And then you could run the foam, the XPS, the 1-inch R5, and then your R15 or R13 or whatever in these cavities, and do it without closed cell spray foam. You'll still never be able to achieve code up in this eave here because there are trusses in it so close, the heel height is so close. But they will want you to upgrade this insulation, at least over the new space, to R49 over here. Not over this garage, but they'll want that all the way over here, the R49. So that is yet another decision, whether you are going to take that apart so that that becomes possible, and if so, whether you're willing to do that, because I have to include that, or I have to resist their attempts to make me make this space, and I don't think they can. I don't think they can make us do anything with this space here if you don't want to undertake to do those two moves there, and we can just do something different however this flushes up. But right now, that's what I'm showing for the moment. And then next I cover various different things, and I'll just try to remember. So that's that old concrete slab down here, and this is where the existing garage door was in here, and presumably we're going to put a window or windows or whatever in that space there. And so part of this film is just exploring what can possibly be done up there, what can possibly be done down here. And as well, I get rid of, as you can see, I got rid of the laundry facility and went to this here, and I make this window smaller, a little smaller in the end, and various things happen as well down through here. But here is that door, and one of the easiest ways, of course, is just to use that existing opening. We have to take that brick out, that brick and that block, from the top of that upward to the bottom of the plate that those trusses are on, and provide some sort of support or header for this window, whatever we do across there. And if we want to go bigger, then we have to saw cut the brick and put some sort of other framing across there. And that's completely possible to do that. But again, these are decisions you have to make a judgment on, because I don't know how any of this space in here is going to be put together. So I'm just trying to consider the outside things and the things that I can consider. Now, this door, when I put this doorway through here, I'm showing that electric panel. That's where the electric panel is right now, mounted on that back wall of that garage, and now it's been furred out. But that's where it would be located, is facing in that way. Later on, you can flip it around here possibly if there's enough wire length, depending on what kind of a headache it is. Right now I'm leaving it shown in place. This electric meter and its mast goes up here to the corner, presumably. or underground, I guess. Up there at the corner, though, the electric meter. So we have to kind of think about that south wall, and what we want to do there is one thing. And we have to think about how we're going to infill this space up here, what kind of windowing we're going to use up there. I presumed we weren't just going to close that in, but I'm showing a couple of sliders there, just like you have. I believe that may be what I settled on. I don't know. So those walls are down. You have one big living space there. And this series of slides was made over the course of days as I was developing this whole next series of slides with regard to the outside, which is a whole other thing. Now here, when I made this half bath, that pantry became a little bit deeper, allowed us to become a little bit deeper without getting any more squeezy up in here. And that is its finished size at that point. We're going to return to this floor plan, at least on this south side, briefly at the end. But before that, I looked at this outside, and this was where the last project had been developed from. I still have to show the old foundation from the old porch. This is where your existing front porch is here. So this plan was developed from a whole an approach to the whole floor plan. And when I first came in here, this was not going to particularly work, and I knew that. And so this whole next series is just an endeavor to make anything work out here, and have that marry with whatever you plan to do on the inside. And so the first thing I did is change that sill to match these limestone sills here. And that's where the existing garage door is there. And I'm not sure exactly what sort of support they've got through here. I don't think it's going to be a steel beam like they have at the rear door, but in any event, we're going up, so we're going to have to reframe this with whatever it takes to accomplish this. So obviously we can get this wide of a window, but I show a couple different looks at this, just trying to figure things out. And one thing, we had this whole approach, all those colors at least kind of work together much more than these do. So I looked at this siding, and this was this wide. This is what we were showing, is this 12-inch hard edge board and batten look from Certainteed. That's only available in these colors here with the dots, which weren't many variations really. And so I went to this reverse board and batten, which is it's a less expensive product, I would think, and it's like this. You kind of see how that looks, but it's available in a few more colors, because I was trying to get something to work with this orange brick for one thing, and I looked at several different colors, several different windows. Ultimately I knew from the start that this rock over there, this stone, was not going to work at that right end. At least I didn't think so. This might have been the best I was able to do with that, using that rock, and I have no idea what kind of rock you're going to use either. But I horsed around. Those shutters probably could be replaced and changed in color, so some of this is messing around with that. And those were those two sliders. Those are probably pretty wide. I think I made them a little more narrow at the end. But at this point here, I kind of got away from that rock altogether, and I wanted to look at that point then you have either two choices: thin brick, and this was the existing texture and color of your rock. So you could use thin brick, or you could, hopefully, it looked to me like I measured everything, and you need about 1,000 bricks. So 2 cubes of bricks, new bricks, if you can get them to match this regular 4-inch base brick, and just fill that all in the traditional way. Whether you key it in where it's meeting the garage door, that would be a decision you have to make. And I really don't know how close of a match you might be able to obtain. Were you willing to do the 4-inch face brick for your infill here in this facade across here? I do think something like that has to happen, but you might want to consider just taking this wall down as well. This brick wall here, hopefully this electric, and then just having the framed wall here. You could have the framed wall here and expand this mudroom space, or you could have the framed wall out here and gain a foot in here along this whole wall, a foot that side, which would probably help the margin here as well. And I don't know, I kind of doubt whether you could actually use that brick that you took down, any of that. I don't think you'd be able to salvage that. But if you could, there's enough there that you could use it up here. And maybe it's a case that you get enough to help with your infill. But I knew from the start I really wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking of using a thin brick and then of some similar texture and then painting the entire structure with some harmonious color scheme. Now we'll return to that. But I looked at thin brick also first, and the different textures that are available, different colors that are available. Yours is more or less a matte finish, at least from Endicott, and that was available in these various colors. And I looked at some of these colors compared to yours. I'm not sure which one would be better. I don't think any of them are going to, I know that none of them are going to match exactly. But the installation can be done over framework or can be done over straight, block wall. And that's kind of a consideration, because at one point I started using this thin brick. And when you look at these, you can either consider this as thin brick or as actual real brick, 4-inch face brick that you've managed to get to match this. But I was using thin brick because the idea going in was that we would just use thin brick and then paint everything, paint the entire house, all the brick on the house, including the new thin brick, so that we could get these things to somehow marry together. I didn't really think that window was necessary in the garage. I got rid of it. And here, made these windows a little smaller and got rid of some of those extra lights. And this one here I had shown a picture window and a slider, and I didn't like that at all. Then I went to those two matching. Those two here matching, which I think they're 4.5-foot sliders. And you can barely see it in this film, but where the patch in, I've made that 10% darker than the rest of it. But the chance that you're going to find something that's going to match your brick that closely is probably pretty remote, I would think. I also will mention here that if this thin brick is used and we apply it like this down here, I'm showing this block down here. These block foundation walls actually run all the way up, and it is applied to that block. So that block is offset an inch or so from this, so that those surfaces will flush. But doing that, the frame wall is then built on the inside edge of that 8-inch block, so that you create this ledge effect here, a deeper ledge than you otherwise would. So I did want to mention those two things. When this is patched in, that will be, it won't match that close, something more like one of those. But I'm not saying that these can't be disguised. I'm not saying that these transitions here couldn't be disguised with landscaping and etc. But that's the reality, that some sort of a match that's not an exact match is not going to match. But notice these windows take up some of that key in work up here, regard if it's real brick or not. They take up some of that. But that's all. I just wanted to interject that quickly. And with the thin brick, if that was matching, it would not be terrible in any event. A lot better than what we were starting with. And then if you just paint everything, and these are just, it's not going to be like that though. You're not going to, it's actually going to be more solid like that if you were to paint everything. So I had brought that far along, which was something I could live with, I could drive past and tolerate. All these shutters have been changed in colors, and I had used this website to horse around with these colors and kind of choose some various different ones while I was doing that. But that was the best this is probably the best I got at that front facade, something I could live with. There will be a downspout. There will be several downspouts because you still have this 5-inch gutters. So there will definitely be a downspout probably somewhere at this joint, which will help this some here. I couldn't think of any kind of window or other accoutrement that made sense on any of these walls. Maybe there's another light added through here. But to return now, keep this film as short as possible. To return now to the back here, this is what we have at the moment, and this is that existing doorway coming out of the garage. And the way I'm going to do that, or the way I plan to do that, that's the brick edges right there that exist, and we would just mount some treated lumber 2x4s to that block wall inside and a framing. And we would actually, to keep our space as wide as possible here, we'll just use a piece of this hardware up at the top so we don't have to have an extra trimmer here. That allows us to get that window all the way up to about 35.5 wide. If those are vinyl, I think those are just ordered size to fit, but a lot of regular sizes are around 35 also. So a 35-inch window would fit in there of any variety depending on what you want to do. This is where the countertop line is, and this doesn't look entirely accurate because I know this window is not all the way down on that countertop, but I wasn't sure whether you're going to have counters extending all the way on this wall here, and if so, that window needs to be sized accordingly. And I showed as a casement windows there, and there's casement windows on the garage as well. That's a single casement, and if that's opened all the way out, I don't know if it presents a hazard for somebody walking by or not. It's about 5 feet off the ground to the bottom of that there. But finally then, so I had gotten to that point, and this was called 429B was the file name. And the only other move then, and this is where that brick becomes painted, but the only other move was whether we want to change this window to a door, basically just leave that brick all the way open and open at the top and make that a door there, at which point I moved that deck this way, and this is what that ends up inside. Then that was 429B, the little wood deck here, and your 2 exit points are here and back here, and whether you want to add that 3rd exit point there. I don't know if this is going to become dining area here and the kitchen becomes expanded in this area here, but depending on how you wanted to put that together, this was one other consideration. When that happened, I pulled up that end of it as well, and kind of finalized this pantry door out. Got this pantry door even wider if you wanted to, like this, where that's just a passage through there, and then we have full 6-foot double door here, 2 3-foot doors. I don't care for this, and I'd probably be inclined to start pushing up here just a little bit so that I could get this pushed up a little bit further if you wanted that wide 6-foot door there. And that concludes that. As so there were a number of things to consider, and that I just have to include on the plans. So that's all for now. I'll be in touch. Thank you very much.